Steve Jobs used to say that, personal computer is a bicycle for the mind. We want AI plus Pakt to become basically a magic wand for the business mind. We say in first place, Pakt. And I say, what? And what we're trying to do at Pakt is say, we're all blockchain.
Everyone, and welcome back to the DeFi Podcast. My name is Bill, and I have with me two of our regulars, Jared and Rhett. Jared and Rhett, how are you guys doing today?
Great.
Awesome. JF is not with us because he's traveling for work this week. He should be back next week. But we have a very special guest on the show this week who I've known for a few years, and it's a pleasure to have him on. His name is Brendan. Brendan, how are you doing today, bud?
Doing wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Brendan is an OG builder in the Avalanche ecosystem. He is the CEO of Pakt. I think it's a Pakt World or Pakt.build and some other. There's also a fund that he's involved with that we're going to get into at the end of the pod. But he has a very colorful, Brendan, you have a very colorful background. And unlike most people in crypto, you're also an incredible writer, which I remember reading your original white paper so many years ago. So we'll get into all of that. But okay, first let's do a quick market update. Basically, in the past week since we recorded the pod, stock market's doing really well. It's up about 4% since we recorded last week. And you wouldn't know it from watching the news, but the S&P has basically recovered the entire loss from the Liberation Day tariff announcements. It was a very wild April. VIX is come significantly back down from 60 down to, the mid 20s or something. So things seem to be calming down a little bit. In interest rate land, the Trump administration continues to pressure the Fed to cut interest rates in a very, very straightforward, maybe a political way. So despite the fact that the stock market has, improved significantly, the market is predicting roughly 100 basis points of cuts to the end of the year now, whereas last week it was something like 85 bips. The next Fed decision is on Wednesday of next week. There's very little priced in for Wednesday itself, but we're going to be watching the statement and press conference very closely to get some clarity on, what's going to happen through the end of the year. So next week could be a big week. Bitcoin has done even better than stocks. When all the turmoil around Liberation Day began, I think BTC was around 82, 83K, something like that. And now we're at, it looks like around 97K. So Bitcoin's doing very well. ETH BTC, on the other hand, is not doing well. It's still kind of plumbing the recent lows. Maybe it looks like it might be bottoming. That might be a little bit of wishful thinking on my end. We'll get into some ETH talk a little bit later in the pod as well. And altcoins have basically been trading in a range with almost nothing breaking out except for, Fartcoin doing well. So really it's been kind of a pathetic continuation for altcoins as well. So anyone got anything to say on the markets? Anything you've been following? Anything you think is interesting?
On the Fed cutting, so some recent economic data came out. Looks like we had a negative growth quarter, and inflation isn't super high, but it hasn't improved that much. So it seems a little bit unlikely that we get rate cuts, even though there's some pressure happening there. I think my guess is that part of the reason for the pressure is there's a lot of U.S. debt that needs to be renewed, and so I think the hope is let's get interest rates way down and then issue a bunch of 10-year bonds or something. But because inflation's not looking good enough, I think it's a little doubtful. I'm not a big expert in that field, but I'm not super optimistic of that in the next couple of months. But if inflation starts falling harder, and some components have fallen, oil prices are way down, then maybe it could happen.
Yeah, I mean the saying is usually that the Fed tells the market when it's going to hike, but the market tells the Fed when it's going to cut. And, there was good to bring up the GDP number. I forgot to bring up. I was meaning to bring that up. But, if we do have a significant recession, that definitely would be reason for. I mean, the Fed is sitting on 425 bips of dry powder in terms of rate cuts, right? Remember at the end of last year, we went from 5.25 to 4.25. They can cut a lot if they need to. And if we are going to enter a recession, hopefully it's not a stagflation type. And, hopefully inflation is also under control and they can cut it. So it would be good for crypto. That'd be great.
I think also M2 supply. I know it's just a very common thing. People say, look at that chart, look at that chart. There's just a 3-month delay. M2 has been upticking. And so now we're starting to hit that 3-month delay lag in terms of when the inflection point happened in M2. So with or without rate cuts, I think we should see some improvement. I know that there is concern about the bull market not starting due to tariff fears, but Bill, to your point, it looks like Liberation Day has been recovered from. Now, there's still losses since a certain individual took office, but I think that was probably just due to insecurity or concerns about whether the sort of Pax Americana global order would continue. Obviously, it has not continued in the same trajectory. The question is this a recalibration towards more prosperity, or is this the long awaited sort of reshuffling of the global economy? Who knows? But that's why it's so interesting to be in this industry that we're all in, because it's not just, a single token we're following. We're in the DeFi podcast and figuring out what the rails for value flow of the future are going to be. It may not just be institutional. So it's a very interesting time. I mean, almost a historic time to be working in this industry right now.
Yeah, never a dull moment. Never a dull moment. So speaking of never having a dull moment, this week, one topic I want to discuss because I have some stuff to say about it is the Movement Labs controversy. So let me just share a screen here for a second. Give me 1 second. Boom. Share screen. Okay, so this is a tweet from the founder, one of the 2 founders of Movement Labs, named Rushi, who I've met a bunch of times, and I'm a huge fan of Rushi. And basically, he talks here about addressing some of the rumors and drama that's been going on. So there was a CoinDesk article, I think, basically talking about something that happened with Movement Labs. So let's just discuss it real quick. And by the way, I am an investor in Movement Labs, and I know the team, and I think very highly of those guys, just as a precursor. But I want to talk about it and get your guys' opinion, because I think you guys may have some experience with this as well. So the controversy is basically that the CoinDesk article wrote about was that when the Movement team launched their token, they essentially, in advance of that, they entered into a market-making agreement with a not well-known entity. We don't really know that much about them, where they signed over 50% of the ecosystem tokens, which is roughly something like 5% of the total amount of the tokens, total amount of Move tokens ever going to be created. And, in the legalese of the document that they signed, they also allowed the market maker to sell above a certain level. I think most of it they could sell above a $5 billion FDV. So when they launched the token at the end of last year, I think it was in December, the FDV initially rocketed up to something like 10 billion at launch. It was an insane launch. And the allegations are that essentially this market maker just dumped on retail on Binance. And, this chart's basically, been hammered ever since. And that market maker got banned from Binance, and Movement is now trying to, basically buy back a lot of those tokens. I don't even know how that process would work. But anyway, it's a lot of negative press, and signing over 5% of your token supply to one market maker sounds like a lot. I mean, it is a lot. But the reason why I want to bring up this topic is, number one, I've met Rushi and the other co-founder, Coop, a few times, and I've talked with them a bunch of times over Telegram and whatever. And these 2 guys are like very hardworking. Always struck me as being like, they know their topic area, which is like the Move language and the ecosystem and building. They know that topic area extremely well, and just always acted completely above board with me. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And the second thing I wanted to say is, I've been on, I am myself a former market maker from TradFi. And one thing that I do is with protocols who ask for it, if I'm working with them, I will help them talk to market makers when they're trying to decide who to choose to help manage their token launch. I didn't do it with Move. Move has so many investors and so many big funds trying to help them out. Like they didn't need my help with anything. But I'll just tell you that the 30 or so phone calls that I've been on with market makers, this is a very opaque and difficult to navigate process, even for somebody who has the technical expertise. Even someone who, I think is kind of like on the lookout for bad language in these, or basically people trying to get your token for cheap. So it's a very difficult process to navigate. So maybe I'll stop there for a second. I have a lot more to say actually, but let me just stop there and say, you guys all, Rhett, Jared, Brendan, all three of you guys work for different protocols. You've probably talked to market makers yourself. What do you guys think when you hear about this controversy?
Well, I can chime in. I also happen to know Rushi and Coop and Tarab business development not extremely well, but I have had dinners across the table for Rushi. First time I met him, fantastic guy. The first time I met him in person, the first time I met him was through a screen. And I think it was 4 a.m. He was in Tokyo, globetrotting, raising money. The guy and his team, they're forces of nature. They truly are. I think it is extremely unfortunate what has happened in this instance. It's crypto. Unfortunately, these things seem to happen more often in this industry than just about any other industry. There is that joke that crypto speed runs all the problems and the benefits of TradFi. So this is one of those instances. It's not my place to start pointing fingers or assigning blame because it's very much in the middle of all of the research, all of the investigation coming out. But I will say, as sort of a character witness, I think what Rushi has done, not just for his team, not just for his ecosystem. He originally actually started in Avalanche ecosystem. He was championed by Luigi DeMeo, and other members of the Astra Ava Labs team. And every single step of the way, they were enthusiastic, they were community oriented. And I know that there is arguably, and I think Avalanche also does a very good job of this, but arguably there's no ecosystem that does more for builders that come to their ecosystem than Move. Movement rather. They make sure that they're funded. They take VC meetings. They basically, sometimes they'll even help build the protocol with some of their engineering help. So if there is anything that was done untoward or unprofessionally, from a character witness perspective, it doesn't seem to me that it would be done from the movement side of things. And it seems to be much more to be from the market maker side of things. And market makers do have sort of a notorious history. As a founder, I've been told before doing any form of market making engagement, beware of a checklist of certain things. And I think even on that checklist, it probably wouldn't be give them 5%. Because that's almost so beyond the pale that it's not even going to be on the list. But it just goes to show that there's so many different ways to have a pitfall in this industry. But just the way that Euler Finance really came back, and other ones have really come back from difficult situations. I think that if anybody can do it at the protocol level, it would be that team. So rooting for them and just rooting for the entire space to clean up its act so that we don't have these stories. We have stories about real products on real chains with real utility and real users, as opposed to trading things around that really don't have as much underlying value because we don't know how to price it. It's mostly speculative. And then we have bad actors doing market shenanigans. So focus on the positive, build for builders, and support fellow builders like the team over at Movement.
I feel like a lot of aspects of building, there's like a really good playbook. If you're like, hey, what should I do for my legal setup or whatever? It's like, okay, this is kind of like the standard playbook, or there's these other kind of things that are pretty well understood. I feel like understanding how to engage with market makers is one of the ways that even like top tier builders are still kind of like, I've talked to a ton of builders, some that have worked with market makers, some that haven't. There's like mixed reviews, which ones are good and bad and whatnot. And then sometimes like the top tier, like I think at least like, for instance, Wintermute has a pretty good reputation. They might be hard to engage with. And so Rushi and the Movement team might have just been like, hey, we need a market maker. And so I view them probably more as victims here. It's too bad. And it's like I said, it's not super clear, what you should do when you launch a token. Like I said, I've talked to a lot of founders and some say, don't use a market maker at all, or, hey, only use these market makers or do these things. And it's like, try to get centralized exchange listings or don't bother. It's like, there's just like a lot of varied opinion there. And so I think a lot of people just feel confused about like what to do. And so that's, I just feel like there's like a lot of, that particular part of like token launches can be like really confusing to builders. By the way, good call out on Euler. I feel like they're bounce back is like so amazing. They should maybe rename themselves to like Phoenix Protocol or something, because they just like, had a really tough time. Now they've come back. They're at over 1 billion TVL, and they have like 20 audits or something. Like if you look at like the audit coverage of them compared to like lots of the rest of DeFi, it's like insane. Anyway.
Just very quickly, Rhett, for people who are not in the know, 30 to 60 second explanation. What happened with Euler?
Euler had a prior version of the platform. It's a lending and borrowing platform. Think like Aave, Compound, Morpho. More similar to Morpho than the others. They do a lot of isolated stuff, as does Morpho. They launched a prior version, and it had this really obscure edge case. Even that version had been heavily audited, but they had this really obscure edge case that resulted in a big exploit. This was a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, maybe longer. And users did get recovery, and then Euler kind of went quiet for a while, built their next version, got like maybe not 20, like 12 or so audits, and then relaunched. And a lot of times, if you took a massive hack like that, it can be really hard to come back from it. Most projects that get a massive hack like that, trust is lost, and then you kind of fade into obscurity. But they came back, and they've been one of the fastest growing platforms in all of DeFi. They have a lot of trust, and I think deservedly. I think it's really well built. It's a really good team. It's got really good audit coverage, and it's a pleasure to use. And yeah, their TVL is probably at like 1.3 billion or something by now.
Wow.
Their launch on Avalanche was like insane. Like they and Ava Labs and the foundation they threw some incentives on it and did a really well planned launch. And I think the TVL inside the Avalanche C chain hit like 100 million in like a day and a half or something. Yeah, it's a really awesome team, awesome product. And the comeback there has just been insane.
Yeah, kudos to them. And actually, it's not that long, right? I mean, it's long in crypto terms, but they came back pretty fast, right? Jared, did you want to say anything else? Because you're actually in a unique position. You're not only do you work for a crypto protocol, but you actually talk a lot with other protocols who want to launch through GoGoPool. So did you want to say anything about the market making moves / that topic?
Yeah. So just from observing a lot of chains, thinking about coming to market, wanting to launch, going through the process, and us as well. I've had conversations with market makers myself, and I feel like a lot of times, because the industry, let's say, of market making and the process of doing it is rather obscure, right? I don't really think there's a general consensus on like, there's one way to do it, right? They all kind of have different methodologies that they use to do their market making. They ask for completely different things. Some of them will ask for money up front. Some of them will ask for tokens, and they'll make the money over time. So I think just going into it, as a founder of a project, there's so many things you have to keep track of that you have to understand intricately. And market making is just one of those things that is probably really hard to get a grasp of. So it's like, that's why there are all these market makers. That's why they provide these services. And yeah, it's really hard to, I think, get a good understanding of it, which is why it's so hard to make a determination between which ones are good and which ones are bad. And why is a good one good and why is a bad one bad? So yeah, I think maybe it's something that we should, consider talking about. Bill, I think you have a little bit of experience there. One of the questions that I have is like, why are there so many bad market makers? Like, is it just because it's just that easy to make money, taking a gigantic load of people's tokens and trading it back and forth, and, you give them moderate results, but you make a ton of money on the side, and then you can just replicate that. Like, what's the process there?
Look, the reality is it's a misnomer. Like, these guys are actually not market makers. Like, really what they are is half market maker, half IPO bankers. Like, so that's kind of what they are.
Yeah.
Like you start a crypto protocol, you have some tokens and you want to launch that thing for the first time. You talk to a market maker, and basically most of these agreements in some way, whatever the structure of the legal agreement is, you're giving them some percentage of your tokens, or you're giving them the option to get the token at some really heavily discounted price. There's always basically some way for them to get some amount of your tokens, because like
and most of those ways ends up screwing over the projects.
Yeah, or you're just giving away a free option or a very cheap option to a protocol. Like, that's really what it is. Like, if you're an actual market maker in TradFi, like, you don't talk to the person from the company. You don't talk to the company. Like, people just call you and ask for a bid and offers on stock. That's it. Or if you're an interest rate trader, like, you're there and market participants come to you and ask you for a price. No one actually gives you any of the underlying as part of the, like, it just doesn't make any sense. They're like, yeah. Anyway, like, advice to anyone who's talking to a market maker, they're basically just trying to get your tokens for cheap. Like, that's all that's really happening. So you have to, I don't actually know how the good market makers work in crypto. So my advice would be, like, talk to a VC who has an in with a market maker that has actually done well with crypto founders in the past. Otherwise, it's really hard to navigate. It's a very opaque space. But
Bill, I think
that can make it. That can make it even more difficult sometimes, because I feel like there are cases where a VC will recommend you to a market maker, and you don't know whether or not that VC is getting maybe a commission, or maybe they're invested in that market maker.
Yeah, maybe talk to a founder that that you trust. Like, I would, like, if Rhett knows a lot of founders, right? Maybe he knows a founder that he trusts that has gone through the process. Maybe that's a better way to do it. And
I know some that have been some very, I'm not going to name names, but high profile protocols in Avalanche who had some market making issues. I'm talking like big time protocols. You go, oh, even them. It happens to just about everybody. And so to me, this gets to the crux of a bigger issue, which is, are we still operating from first principles in crypto? Or have we begun to look more at price and less at logic? Because I think that we are at a pivot point right now in this industry where either we're going to arrive at utility and we are going to drive real value, or potentially another form of technology or a more centralized version of what was originally the sort of blockchain and crypto DeFi grand vision becomes the VHS to our Betamax. And we have something better, but it doesn't actually win. And so I think it's a real important time for everybody on this podcast, as well as anyone listening, and anyone who is serious about this industry being something more than number go up technology. Ask the people who you respect, how do you feel? Do you think we can do better? And how can we do this together? That would be my encouragement, because I think we can win something pretty brilliant right now, all collectively, but it's going to take some work.
Yeah, these are good points. I think a couple of just quick thoughts on last thoughts on the market maker thing. One, I think part of the reason why they negotiate such attractive deals for themselves is they do bear a fair bit of risk they want to be paid for. It's different if you're just in the market making for Bitcoin, ETH, like the majors or Google stock or whatever. That's different than some brand new token that could have extremely high volatility and could have a lot of downside. And so I think they're just like asking to be paid for that. But then in a lot of cases, I think they're negotiating too much upside. But if I'm in their position and I'm like, I have no idea where this token is going, I want to be paid for any risk I have of trading it. So I can totally understand that. I think there is this other view, and I think this kind of gets a little bit at what Brendan's talking about too, is like some of the really early projects, especially Bitcoin. It's not like Satoshi went and found some market makers. And so I know some people who have the view of like, hey, drop the thing, build utility, get the community participating, and don't go do private liquidity deals, or don't go do private market making deals, etc. I can see both sides of that argument, but I think there is something valuable to the, hey, maybe like have this thing go in a more like community centric way. There's a similar thing, like a lot of people previously used to pay a lot of money to get listed on centralized exchanges. And my view lately, at least, has been maybe just be successful enough, just try to be successful enough that a centralized exchange will want to list you anyway, rather than going and paying a bunch of money to get listed there. I think also, like, a lot of teams these days probably can't afford to pay a lot of money for a lot of things. Like in the ICO era, teams were able to raise like enormous amounts of money. These days, funding is more rational. So if you have like a small runway, like, to me, it doesn't feel like probably good value to go pay a bunch of money to get listed on a centralized exchange. But yeah, that sort of thing is kind of, I think, related.
I mean, I think some people expect to follow what the typical path of launching a project or launching a token is, right? You launch your project, you get your funding, and then, well, you want to get listed on centralized exchanges. If you want to do that, you have to pay a bunch of money up front. You have to have a market maker, or they just, some of them will be like, you need a market maker in order to have your token listed on our exchange. And so having those things, like the upfront costs are extremely high. And I think they're actually getting higher over time. I wonder at what point the rationale behind just saying, yeah, we're just going to put our tokens on an AMM and that'll be good enough. Obviously, places like Binance are a very attractive casino that can bring a lot of attention and liquidity to your tokens. But I feel like projects just kind of have to ask themselves, like, is it worth it in the long run with the risk associated with, exposing yourself to all of those extra things like market makers and putting all those tokens out there?
And so who are you as a project? Who are you building for? Are you building for traders? Are you building for a future that's 6 months out? Are you building for a future that's 6 years out? Are you building for an AI-powered future? Are you building for institutions? Because this technology is still so new, shockingly enough. What was it? AI really started showing up in like late 50s, early 60s, and now it's becoming real. Blockchain's about, you could argue 30 years old with cryptography and all the cypherpunks, or, if it's the Goon story, and, most of us are Avalanchers. I believe he was building early 2000s, Karma in 2004. Bitcoin shows up proof of work 5 years later. But this is still, in some sense, a technology discovering what its reason or what its purpose is. And so it's very hard to price something that's still seeking its purpose. And so I think every individual protocol, project, app, what have you, needs to figure out who they are, who their core user are, and what vision they are trying to make become the sort of dynamic maypole that we all circle around as it becomes a hub for what blockchain actually is going to be in a profitable sense, as opposed to what Goon likes to call the waiting for Godot approach. Next week, I remember first Barcelona Summit, waiting for Godot. Second Barcelona Summit, waiting for Godot. Doesn't say it as much anymore because I think it becomes a little bit dispiriting. And that's where founders and teams really need to band together and say, look, we do believe in this future. We know that maybe the market is shifting more towards AI or more towards other sorts of things, but we're going to make this real because we know what blockchain's full potential is.
Yeah, I love his line about, waiting for Godot. Like, I mean, in some sense, like, it works, right? These blockchain projects basically just promise the world, never deliver, and cash out, and it works fine, I think it's hard to break in the top 10 and stay there that way. But anyway. Okay, listen, we were going to talk a little bit about Ethereum Foundation, news, but we're running a little bit over time. So let's push that to next week. I'm sure there'll still be a bunch of arguing and drama over that we can discuss next week. Let's instead get into your project, Brendan. So can you talk a little bit about, you've been involved in the Avalanche ecosystem since the very beginning. So I'd like to give just a little overview of how you got involved with Avalanche at the beginning and what you started building and kind of where you are right now.
Absolutely. It's been quite the journey. So to give some personal background, I worked in Hollywood, politics, as a screenwriter, executive, sort of development executive. And then I was on the Obama campaign, did grassroots activism there, and then had my own nonprofit that was sort of early YouTube promotional, using it as propaganda, but really more to get out the vote. So nothing sort of insidious. It's just let's get young people to vote so they can take charge of the future. I also had started.
Hold on. You started doing state Democrat propaganda. This podcast's over. I'm not. No. That's crazy. Okay.
Well,
cool.
I'll put it this way: as someone who considers himself a progressive, but focuses on the progress, not the tribalist issues, that culture war really sort of mires everything into the muck in a non-constructive way. I would really like to watch blockchain become something where it surfaces meritocracy and efficacy of approaches rather than the mudslinging we're seeing that probably isn't maximally constructive for where this nation and really the world needs to go. So I'm a big tent thinker, a big tent sort of approach guy. And I believe, I've got cousins that are MAGA all the way. I'm not going to talk about my politics positions, but I do believe that everyone has something to contribute. And hopefully blockchain can be a trusted value layer where we can have real sort of discussions as opposed to, am I talking to a bot? Am I talking to someone who's just preaching their bags and all that kind of stuff? But all right, so back on track. I also had a startup in 2013 called Leakheads. Leakheads, we got the #1 Google result for fantasy sportsbook and fantasy sportsbook game. And while it was successful in terms of our friends liked it and people were playing it and the big Google result was there was a law, the UIEGA basically kept us from being able to scale it. FanDuel and DraftKings, they were fine. We couldn't because of some, some red tape. So what happened was 4 years later, a startup out of Berkeley and UCLA, that was a blockchain startup, very early blockchain startup said, hey, we're intrigued by your past. Would you like to be basically employee number 2? I said, yeah, sure. I'm curious about blockchain. It was too early. Everyone loved us, but we were trying to roll our own crypto. This was in the era of Ethereum had just launched. People were doing IOTA, Steemit, and there was a lot of sort of centralized stuff or failed science projects masquerading as protocols. So when crypto winter hit, out with the bathwater, but I was bit by the crypto bug. And I was reading a bunch of different white papers and, making small plays here and there, but nothing really felt right until I read the Avalanche white paper, at which point, boom. I felt like if this on paper makes sense, if the team can execute it, we may have the blockchain future that has long been promised us. So I researched the team. Well, if there's a team to build the thing, it's this team. So I then started trying to figure out ways to work my way into the ecosystem. I did a little bit of reply guy and got into some Twitter conversations with Vitalik and Goon going back and forth. I'm like, oh my gosh, these legends are responding to me. Wow, the access of the internet, right? And then they had something called the AvaX grant program, pre-mainnet. So I was fortunate enough to get into that with someone from my hometown, Evanston, Illinois. He had a project called, Coin Flash, I believe, turn credit card change into crypto. He had to shut it down because Coinbase changed their APIs. And I thought, let's do credit card change into AvaX. Great. So we apply with that. We get in, and then we don't hear from anybody for like 5 months. And I'm like, is this happening? Is this not happening? They come back to us and say, okay, yeah, we're in, changing the terms a little bit, but whatever. And then we create this app that was not that. It turned into sort of a decentralized active portfolio management platform called Prospero. And actually, I'm now talking to potentially some people from Faro to see if we can get that up and running this time out. But in the course of that process, I met other people in that cohort. And one of them was a gentleman by the name of Olusegun Komolafe. Olusegun Komolafe put some banks on blockchain in Nigeria. He also did logistics companies, and he had applied with the decentralized Spotify. Coming from an entertainment background, I was very intrigued. So I reached out to him and I say, what's your big vision for blockchain? And his was very similar to mine. I wanted to basically use that trusted value layer to reduce exploitation. Because in Hollywood, I was asked to either exploit people as an executive or I was exploited as a screenwriter. And I thought, let's get, just transparency, trust, audits, all that. And he said, yeah, I'd like to reduce exploitation too. I'm Nigerian. I'm like, oh, yeah, you win. I'm an idiot. I probably should have paid more attention to that. Nice. So my cultural insensitivity there, there's been a lot of learning over this 4 or 5 year process. So we make an appointment to follow up in 2 days. And he ghosts me. He doesn't show up. Pretty frustrated by that. It's just like, oh, that's disrespectful, but who knows? Maybe this is just crypto. Maybe this is something else. And then he hits me up the next day, says, I'm so sorry. He's very apologetic. Well, that wasn't very respectful. And I said, yeah, well, the Nigerian paramilitary police, they kicked down my door and held both myself and our developers at gunpoint. to shake us down for bribes.
What? Dear Lord.
Yeah. So at this point, the sort of crypto talk is thrown in my face. It's like, are you going to actually walk the walk? Or are you just another person on Twitter espousing opinions and, getting grants and all that type of stuff? So that was the point where there was a very focused decision to go down the path of making blockchain and crypto something useful. So we came up with a concept called AfroFund, which was connecting African tech talent to global opportunity. Took that back to my business partner, Matt Palmieri. Anyone in the Avalanche ecosystem probably knows him. And he said, well, how about you do that for all the ascending nations? Because it seems like it would have a lot of value there. I'm like, yeah, that's a very good call. And then it turned into, well, how about we build a platform to launch those? And that was kind of a WordPress for Web3 moment. And so a year later, we went to Avalanche Creates. It was an event up in Berkeley, Bay Area. Bay Area has always been pretty nice to me. And they had a pitch contest. About 30 different teams applied. We were fortunate to be one of the 6 that got in. But earlier that day, Avalanche, they just released their core wallet. They were doing some things, and we were integrating it into a live demo. And it injected a new nonce, I believe, into our backend, and it broke the whole damn thing. So I'm about to go up on stage in front of A16Z, Dragonfly, Pantera, Goon, Kevin, like all the people who I look up to immensely. And in 3 hours, I'm going to have to publicly just go to a podium and go like, all right, well, this isn't going to work. And let me show you these things. And here's our slide. And I'm done. Thankfully, our incredible team in Nigeria fixed it in time. I was in a workspace, like feverishly typing with them in like one of those telephone booths, very constricted and stressed. But we get it going. I show up and I'm looking at all these other teams, and they're incredible. There was a Duolingo on chain. There was a AR mobile app that was on Avalanche. Some DeFi protocols, of course. And then I go up and I realize, oh, they have a plexiglass podium. I use a optical mouse for all my demos. So now I'm nervous and I'm like using my finger and it's trembling. I'm using a laptop and the NFC, or rather the HDMI cords I plug into my laptop into the screen behind me. Looks like glitch art for whatever reason. It doesn't work for me. It works for everyone else. So I feel like I've absolutely tanked this demo, killed the company. The judges go off and deliberate. And when they come back, they say in third place, this team, like, wow, they were incredible. Second place, this other team, well, that's the best team. Who could be first place? They say in first place, Pakt. And I'm like, what? I actually exclaim out there, Avalanche people that got a little video of it. And what happened was the demo was real, and it's a real product, and they bought into the WordPress for Web3, and we can see that because they're really running with that marketing. I think that's what really sparked us to Avalanche in the first place, which was there is a WordPress for Web3 that is going to be necessary for crypto to become crypto or blockchain to become blockchain. Otherwise, we really are just playing in sort of individuated chains or general purpose chains, sort of an America Online approach, but once we give builders the capacity to spin up their own platforms on their own chains, interoperating, and then obviously now with AI, giving them full reign of interoperating block space, we're going to get a new internet. And so that started the journey. After we got that, we got $100,000 from Forward, which is a Fiduci Scout Fund. And this was the second big leap of faith. Our team was based primarily in Nigeria, just a few of them. And that infrastructure is not very good. Electricity and internet go out. It's really hard to build a company that way. So I flew to Rwanda and got a developer house, and we all shacked up there for about 4 months. Then we moved to Nairobi for another 8. We built shoulder to shoulder. And that basically, over that time, we also were flown out to London to demonstrate for MasterCard, HSBC, Lloyds, Swift, and Barclays, our sort of gig work platform. But that's the journey. I know it's long-winded. So I'll pause for station identification, so to speak, before I go into actually what the hell is Pakt, which probably people are curious at this point.
Yeah, no, I knew some of the details of the initial. I forget what the name, the Avalanche Creates thing. I wasn't there, but I heard some of these details. But it's fun to hear you talk about it. Fill in some of the blanks. Okay, but yeah, so you're using some keywords here like chain sites, and by the way, I have to admit, I am I wrote a small angel check to Pakt, so I am an investor. I'll just say that disclosure. But yeah, just talk to us a little bit about about what are chain sites, what exactly is Pakt,
Sure.
What's going on. When you say it's a WordPress for Web3, what do you mean by that?
Right. So a couple different things. So Pakt's underlying goal is to just bake the trusted value layer of blockchain into the internet that we're all familiar with. Imagine that you're doing a transaction and it's not held in escrow. Well, now the person who is doing the transaction, there's a whole lot more trust that if something goes wrong, now you have a headache. And that headache is already baked into the psychology of the engagement. So you already are engaging in trust in a transaction where you have a lack of trust. So what we have in our change sites, so to speak, is we take the Web2 or the apps that you know and love, and we try to bake blockchain directly in. So when we started as the WordPress for Web3, our concept was we're going to have templates, we're going to have mods. We built some platforms ourselves, including a gig work platform, which is what we were flown out to London to showcase, because 47% of the planet are gig workers, and MasterCard and all those banks were very intrigued by how to blockchainify them. But we knew that we had to, the same way WordPress had to show, here's a blog, and you can build that with WordPress. We needed to show, here's a trusted web experience, and you can build that with Pakt. So we came up with this concept of change sites. We came up with the concept of a gig marketplace, and people seemed to dig it. In fact, when the Avalanche Ambassador DAO launched, we created a bounty platform for them that was very similar. And those early ambassadors to this day still hit us up, rave about it. I saw a whole tweet today saying, hey, can I get onto that platform? Like, oh, well, it's become this platform. But yes, absolutely. We're going to empower the community.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Because like some of the stuff, I'm sorry for the sirens in the background, but some of the stuff that you're talking about, I didn't understand because I'm not a web developer. You know, I come from a very narrow slice of finance, but like WordPress, my understanding is WordPress is basically this site that a huge percentage of people who creates content on the internet use, right? It's like made it very easy for people to create websites.
Totally.
And you're basically doing the same thing, but making it so that you create a website that also has baked into it crypto rails.
Exactly. Okay, well stated. And sorry for the confusion.
No confusion. You just we joke on the time on this pod that I'm the left curve take, like Rhett and Jared probably already all in, but the really basic stuff sometimes I don't know.
No,
so it's got to dumb it down for me, you know.
Totally. So if we look at the this was a chart that we put into our deck, and then we shared it with the CMO at Avalanche, and then it ended up in Goon's keynote at the last summit. We showed a chart that said, here's when WordPress was created. And you look like not many websites. And then WordPress is created here, and it starts ticking, and does that very classic hockey stick growth. And it's because it turned early adopters into web builders. And before that, you had sort of America Online, you had centralized entities, Yahoo saying, we're the internet. And then WordPress made it, we're all the internet. And what we're trying to do is say right now, we're a blockchain is a single protocol or a generalized protocol or an institution or a bank. And what we're trying to do at Pakt is say, we're all blockchain.
Interesting. I like that analogy.
Yeah. And so what we're doing now, because WordPress became outdated last year, not with regards to a blockchain context, but with regards to Web2 because of AI. And so now there are these vibe coders. Some of you guys know about maybe Lovable or Cursor or Replit, where you prompt engineer, you type in some general, like some text, just as if you're typing in a document. And then the LLM takes that, says, here's how we turn that into code. And this is the new version of Pakt, and we're getting a lot of very solid response for it. So, Bill, as an investor, you'll probably be keen on this. Right now, you can use a platform called Lovable. You can type in some very basic text like, hey, make me an application where I, as a creative, can earn tips in crypto with a QR code or a link. We've created that. We actually ran that experiment, and it's something that would normally take 2 to 3 months to build out, or maybe a month if it's kind of a down and dirty. Now it takes a couple days. But the difference between just doing that with AI, then AI plus Pakt, is if you do it with AI, you get an app, but you don't get a business because those wallets aren't pointing to anything. We are the ones who give you the crypto wallet. We are the ones who give you authentication. We are the ones who give you escrow and all of those different functionalities with our services just by prompting in use Pakt, use its APIs. And then on the back end, you get our full business command center. So instead of having to spend 6 months or a year launching a business, as we were all talking about, well, what's the legal? There's some frameworks for this. There's some frameworks for payments. Now you just prompt engineer into one of these AI coding tools, use Pakt, and now you have a business. So the ultimate vision is to be able to, hopefully within a year or two, I'm thinking closer to a year to maybe even 6 months, have a conversation with an AI about a business you'd like to create. It creates that business on blockchain rails using Pakt. and you can spin up businesses $200, $300 the way that people used to have to spend $30,000 or $300,000, go do VC rounds, go do market making, go through all of these frustrations that block inspiration from turning into innovation. Steve Jobs used to say that, personal computer is a bicycle for the mind. We want AI plus Pakt to become basically a magic wand for the business mind. So that's where we're at right now as we speak. That was 2 weeks ago, and the response has been phenomenal. Just turning AI into a blockchain tool instead of just something that, is going to gobble up our consciousness.
Got it. Okay. There's also currently a Pakt site that's being used by Avalanche ambassadors, right? Could you talk a little bit about this? I've gone on the site a little bit and used it myself. It looks really slick.
Yeah,
Could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So the first one was called Snowfort, and that's what we built for the Avalanche ambassador DAO. That was a bounty platform. So companies, protocols from the Avalanche ecosystem like Banky, GoGoPool, and also Avalanche ambassador DAO themselves would say, hey, post a thread about this subject matter, and we'll pay you, $5 or $3 or what have you. And of course, the ambassadors, early stage ambassadors, and now it's called Team One, Colombia, Africa, Latin, other places in Latin America. And I think there was one in Vietnam, one very good Indian threader. They were earning some decent money writing that. So then we spoke to the CMO at the time, a guy named Brad. And he was really intrigued by getting the community builders and turning community members into builders via this sort of mechanism. He wanted people to come to the Avalanche website instead of just seeing sort of a digital pamphlet, having a highly engaging, high-touch welcome to Avalanche experience where you get thrown right into you make money or you earn crypto or you generate value when you're in the Avalanche ecosystem. He did depart shortly thereafter. So what we did is instead of it being specifically an Avalanche-focused platform, we called it Pakt.build. Before it was going to have an Avalanche theme name, but it's the same experience. So anybody can go to Pakt.build and create a job and pay in crypto into a non-custodial escrow wallet. Then anybody can go work and earn that from that job and get that crypto out of that wallet once both parties have reviewed each other. That non-custodial escrow wallet is a really critical point because it gives both parties skin in the game, as opposed to your Fiverr or your Upwork or what have you, where yes, there's escrow, but it's not actually held on chain. So the person who put it there gets to determine when they release it, as opposed to, okay, well, now because they're equally incentivized to be fair collaborators, the collaborations turn out to be higher quality. So there's that one. There's also Pakt.fund, which I believe some people have seen, which is for KOLs, essentially, not to be the ones who dominate the community narrative. This is actually more of like a micro KOL. So if you're a community member, you can promote to gain early access to fund a project. And right now, we have Pakt ourselves as sort of dog fooding it. We've gotten wonderful response from some of our favorite community members and also new ones, especially in China, surprisingly. Where they really believe in the Avalanche ecosystem, and then they sign up to do a post, a tweet, they refer a friend, and then they get access to buying into what we call FPAK, which is a token like a digital IOU. Can't trade it, lives on the platform, otherwise it would be a digital security. But then that will be redeemable for Pakt, the actual token, at TGE. So there's a lot of different use cases. There's also a social media platform we built on top of Pakt called Tech 1000, NFT token gated. And the nice part is all of these different services, all of these different APIs, these are going to be what the AIs can use so that it's just more colors on the palette for you to paint with when you're painting your inspired idea and you want to turn that into a business.
Both of these sites are super slick, by the way.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
So I got a random phone call coming through, blasting in my headphones. Whoever's editing this can cut that out. Sorry. Yeah, they're super slick sites. I have a follow-up question about the Pakt.build. So I've kind of thought about these sort of systems with respect to crypto for a while, and just kind of curious what you think this will kind of look like over time when thinking about the fact that North Korean operatives will try to get onto teams building code. And is it building better reputation over time, or is it more like, hey, don't put a job on here that touches a part of the code base that could be put at risk? or maybe you have them do, just very different type of work. I'm just curious how you think about that piece.
That's a really good question. So we have a couple different user journey flows, but one of the wonderful things about blockchain crypto is you create a primitive and then people will use it in ways that you never expected. And, it can dynamically cascade out from there. When it comes to code in North Korea, basically just ask someone to swear at Kim Jong-un. And they can't, they literally can't put that in writing. It would be very problematic for them. But beyond that, there's also reputation score elements to that platform. So after every gig, both the client and the talent have to review each other. And this, again, is equal skin in the game. So if someone has good reviews and it's very difficult to protect against someone who would be willing to spend 2 years on a work marketplace to build up an established score of 94. You hire them, and then if you don't tell them to go say something snarky about Kim Jong-un, and they turn out to be the DPRK, okay, you got beaten by the best in the world. But I would say that if you do the other things and you pay attention to score of the reputation, you do the safeguard measures necessary to filter through. This is going to be, I believe, a fairly powerful primitive for two reasons. One, there's ascending nations who lack reliable infrastructure for banking and contracting, and sometimes the currency that they earn in, if it's local, can depreciate anywhere between 10 to 20% overnight, just based off of governmental decree. You start earning USDC, people get very, very excited about that. I've experienced this firsthand, and it's also why we're a Circle developer partner. They've seen that we have moved hundreds of thousands of dollars through these platforms, partially our own salaries, because we always put our money where our mouth is. And that, to me, holds grand promise, especially with the stablecoin advancements like the Genius Act and other, sort of every bank having their own individual one, PayPal having theirs. It really does seem that stablecoins are going to become a dominant force for advancement in the space over the next couple of years. Also, with regards to our AI coding approach, I'm not an engineer, but I can prompt engineer something, and we'll continue to get better at prompt engineering something the first 80 to 90%. So if I can prototype something and then kick it to an actual developer, and they spend a few days or a week instead of 3 months, well, the cost curve of development has just dropped precipitously. And so that's where we think is another potential use case there. We also have issue resolution baked in. This is what A16Z Sam Ragsdale at the Avalanche Creates Pitch Contest. He immediately raised his hand and said, yeah, I see platforms. What's your issue resolution situation? And when we presented ours to him, he's like, oh, that's actually novel. Because if you have money held in a non-custodial escrow wallet, then you can have a jury selected from people on that platform and have a majority rule verdict. And we have it 5 people. So 3 people say this person won, this person lost. Well, now the funds in the non-custodial escrow wallet go back to the person who won. And this keeps things self-contained in a way that we're leveraging the new primitives that we're building on top of the new primitives of blockchain, startups on top of startups all the way down. But we got to get innovative. We got to get a little bit more imaginative, I think, as a space with, this is a new tool. How can I use it in a new way? And so issue resolution hopefully can also increase the quality of the people that you would engage in on a platform like that.
Can I ask one quick interjection here, which is, one thing I really liked about your project when I first heard about it was like, for the actual users on the site, like they don't necessarily have to care anything about the blockchain behind it, right? Except for one detail, which is if they're a person who works and uses a crypto wallet to get paid,
right?
Then what happens? Like they're used to getting paid on Ethereum or some other chain. This is on Avalanche. So what happens?
Great question. So the on-ramp, off-ramp, basically there's a sphere and it's called crypto. And then the rest of the world has its money, and there's a lot more money out there than there's in here. And how do you move it? Both inside of that sphere to outside of that sphere, and then within that sphere, the interoperability between chains. I think this is one of the main reasons why we were so bullish on Avalanche and the interoperable L1s, because if that gobbles everything up, then problem solved. There's also platforms like MindSwap. We're big fans of theirs, that handle transactions cross-chain pretty quickly. Layer 0, obviously, they're fantastic. We are also, this gets into sort of design and architecture space, but I'd be very keen to see an Avalanche L1 almost work like a functional bridge for each chain. or different L1 for Solana to this, and then a different L1 for Ethereum, a different L1 for maybe movement. Because a movement originally started as an L1, but it's something that serves as a bridge for each chain to move money into that ecosystem. It is a challenge. I also think that when you look at on-ramps and off-ramps that are more, let's say, Web2 corporate, the fees are exorbitantly high. And so if you're on-ramping something paying 3 and you're off-ramping something paying 3, most people don't want to come to a work platform and take a 6% haircut on their earnings. But that's kind of how it is in Web2, where platforms like Fiverr will charge to 20%. And obviously the App Store notoriously takes 30%. One of the main values of blockchain is just removing these middlemen. And I've heard of various on-ramp and off-ramps now that are more sort of decentralized, and they're charging instead of the 3% that some of the name players in the space are taking, they're charging 0.11. So we're moving from percentages to bips, and that's the way it needs to be in order for this technology to scale and also to unleash the latent innovation that is in so many of these teams that just can't make the numbers work until the tech advances. I do feel the tech is advancing now finally to really have a flourishing of some projects that have been around for a while, ourselves included.
So just curious, if somebody comes to the build site and they want to, launch a simple service, you're saying that, I'm just trying to understand. So
sure.
All of the sort of back-end wallet framework, this is my wallet. Here's, somebody wants to click to pay, the typical, your MetaMask will show up. You can just process it and that's all handled, right?
Exactly. Should I share my screen? I mean, I can give you guys just a quick little,
absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, pairing that kind of ease of use with the, like you were saying, the WordPress functionality and throwing AI into it, it just seems like, I'm sure you've probably heard this take before, but I feel like it seems pretty obvious that a lot of people can just show up with small services, and now you've on-ramped potentially thousands of people who've never used crypto before into using crypto.
From your lips to the fate's ears, my friend, that is exactly our vision. And we think that if you want to get to 1 billion users, you need to get 1,000 builders first. Now, what's the easiest way to get builders? Think of WordPress. You turn early adopters into builders. So WordPress, I want to blog. And then someone says, this framework I can use for something else. Maybe I toss on a wall. Maybe I toss on a marketplace. Same sort of concepts here. So I'll share really quickly. In fact, I'll give you guys a little sneak peek of something here. So this is our in-process revised landing page. And so what you're seeing right here is this is what it looks like when you prompt a platform in an AI coding tool. And then what shows up is this. And this is a real application that we built with an AI coding tool and Pakt's APIs and documentation. So the process is we needed to refine our documentation so that when we give a URL, the AI coding tool scans it and says, I know what to do. And I'm going to grab this API from the link provided. And so here we just said, integrate the Pakt wall API. That's text. I know everybody on this call can do that. So congratulations, guys. You all just became coders. You all now have the ability to code a platform and have that platform become a blockchain-powered business. Now, what do we mean by a blockchain-powered business? This is what we call our Pakt Command Center. I'll log in here. And what this does is this allows you to both launch a business and then also manage and monitor it. So every single time that you are going to spin up a platform, you do need to spin up what we call, your own server. Real simple. Most people think that the internet is magic and it just shows up, but of course it runs on computers somewhere. So what we'll do is we'll say, hey, you give your chain site a name, and then when you make a payment, it's going to be $50. You spin up an EC2 and an S3 on AWS. We know that's a little centralized, but we do say in the journey between Web 2 and Web 3, you may need to make a pit stop at Web 2.5 to get to the final destination. It's very important for us to note that we are not splitting a server between a bunch of different people. I know that's an approach that some people take. That's their call. Our call is we don't want you to suffer from noisy neighbor data. We don't want somebody else's problem to become your problem. That's kind of the whole point of L1s in the first place. So we're keeping with that philosophical backing. But what's more important is once you have launched your platform, then you get a full management stack for your business. So we were talking about Pakt Build before, and just for anybody who's wondering what Pakt Build looks like, this is it. Build on Pakt and crypto. There's also a mobile version that is actually pretty slick. I think it's, a lot of people go, oh, this is a great application. It's native, right? Like, nope, total web app. So we're looking forward to people, taking a peek at this. And ideally, if you want someone to even spin something up for you that's small, big, anywhere in between, start posting some jobs on here. We really want to see some work, marketplaces and community efforts taking seed by the Avalanche Summit. But let's say you got this going and you create a job. So hello at Pakt.world. I will show you what it looks like when you create a job. If you can create a fantasy football team, you can create a job. Come here, create a job title. We say DeFi Podcast demo, enter the amount. We'll call it $1,000. You do pay in USDC, Vox, even Cat and Wink and other whitelisted tokens from the ecosystem. You'd select that. And I won't go into the whole thing here, but after you've completed this, before inviting someone, you will be prompted to deposit into a single-use, non-custodial escrow wallet. It's actually also protected by multi-party compute because our CTO hails from a banking background. And so we take a key, break it into 3 shards, and until both parties at the completion of the job review their work, the shards stay separate. So it's not just blockchain protected, it's also MPC protected. So once those shards combine, after the reviews are done and everyone's happy with the work that's been executed, it shows up in your wallet, and you can see, you can make withdrawals, you can view all the tokens you've earned, etc. So all of this activity, the reason I'm going into such depth here is that's tracked on your dashboard here. And this is where you can see all the revenues you've made, all the value flow, your packs. And this is an MVP version. This is the version that we're going to market with. But of course, this is going to grow more and more detail over time. If you want to change your fee structure, you just click it here and you can change it to 2%, 10%, 1%, 0 if you want. You can see all of the activity here. It looks like new person just registered 4 hours ago. So we do see the community still very intrigued and active. Control panel, change your icon. Most important part is billing. I won't go too much into depth there. But what's really important about billing is if somebody has created a concept with AI and with Pakt's APIs, they may not know how to be a full stack DevOps engineer that costs $400,000 a year or more. In fact, this entire micro cottage industry about helping startups that did well and then all of a sudden discover that their AWS bill is $40,000. We are keeping it so that it is streamlined and it auto scales. And if you need to grow because your business is growing, we've got that covered for you. If it doesn't, you only pay for what you use, a la carte, kind of the appeal of Web3. We've got referrals and invite programs baked in because obviously also people aren't necessarily digital marketers. The very best form of marketing is word of mouth. So we give you links that represent that online. And then last but not least, we've got this admin management component where if I'm the super admin because I created a company with my AI tooling and integrating Pakt's APIs, I can assign other people to be admins or managers or developers. And what is an observer? An observer can look but not touch. What they do is they will be able to audit things, which is useful if you need an audit for accounting purposes. Or let's say Pakt Build is making $25,000 a month now. And we say, hey, you know what? We went from 0 to 1. We are Pakt. We need to focus on Pakt specifically. And we think that somebody else could scale this massively. So maybe we would hold an auction and we could have different observers come take a look. We're going to make the deed to this chain site, again, an application or a platform or a website with blockchain baked in. We'll make the deed an NFT. And so when we sell the NFT, the observer who we sold it to now becomes the super admin. They just bought a business. This is, again, how we're trying to use blockchain primitives to eliminate all of these frustrations that we know keep very inspired builders from ever becoming actual builders. All of those frictions dissuade people and they go, oh, you know what? Let me go find a job that I don't like instead of I'm going to take a bet on myself because now I'm empowered to do so. With AI and this full blockchain business backend, that's our job to empower and enrich the people who want to build their own future.
Very cool. There's a lot there, right? And to me, like it feels like anything to remove the like I feel like it's a good net to catch a potential use case of building a website with the blockchain embedded in it. Like we're not exactly sure what part of it will be the most useful, but there's a lot there. There's a lot of potential there. So it sounds really fascinating, Brendan. Thank you for walking us through that.
Thank you for taking the time.
And this works right now. I mean, from my personal experience, I could use this for 3 different things off the top of my head that this could potentially just make more easy to use.
It might be a good idea. So we are launching our beta to about 5 members. There's some that are already spoken for, but we do have some slots that aren't. If you'd like to be an early beta member, use case, love to explore that with you. And then maybe it could be something that you just, we check in over time and see how it's going for you. If you think it merits mention on the podcast in future episodes, okay. If not, totally fine too. But the goal for us is to find the early stage builders before we throw the gates wide open, because we recognize there's 2 things here. First, we want to crawl, walk, run. We have, and every founder has their beliefs of this is the way the world is. And then the world says, no, it's not. And you need to adjust on the fly. We wouldn't want to say this is the way the world is and go live to 10,000 people. It's better to figure out the way the world is based on individual users and then scale it up. And then secondly, the scaling of AWS is expensive, not super expensive. And we only charge 3% on whatever the actual AWS costs are for the user. But we want to make sure that we are fine tuning these things, because we did have one little hiccup and all of a sudden you go, oh, well, that's $3,000 in 2 days. And you really don't want that $3,000 to be compounded by 30 users all at once. So these are the fun logistical challenges of being a founder, as you guys know. But yeah, Jared, if we would love to hear what you'd like to build and, ideally facilitate, getting the AI vibe coded into existence with Pakt on the back end.
Sounds good. Yeah, definitely be interested.
Very cool. Okay. Well, thank you, Brendan, for joining us. I appreciate it. Are you going to be at the Avalanche Summit in a couple weeks? You going?
I am. In fact, I also, some people know Hodl Avox. He works over at Avalanche now. He invited me to participate in something that I don't think I can let the cat out of the bag just yet. But let's just say that there's elements of main stage or general stage in the main area, sort of off the cuff comedy. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. He and I were...
Are they putting you to work as a screenwriter, or what are they doing? Is that what's going on? Yeah.
So it's not screenwriting, although it is always funny to me how much of Pakt's messaging ends up in the Avalanche ecosystem. And it's the most flattering thing imaginable, because it means that somehow we're attuned to what the broader vision is of the space that we love and honor so much. So Hodl was my college roommate. Hodl was in improv. Hodl was someone who taught 3 different people how to do improv, and they went on to SNL. So he's really good. He's one of the funniest people I've ever met, and he's very sly and sort of down. He keeps it under wraps, but he wants to include more of that sort of entertainment and comedy stuff in the Avalanche ecosystem. And so we will see at Summit his idea, and I will be part of that. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, love it. Great little teaser. That's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it. And, anyone who's going to Avalanche Summit, which I think is May 20th to May 22nd, so in 3 weeks' time, I guess, would love to chat with anyone who watches the pod or would like to join the pod. That'd be great. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. Have a great weekend. See ya. Bye.